Alrighty, so this is going to be the second half of this week. I'm recording this early because I will be traveling, and so I didn't want to accidentally miss it or anything. But this is going to go over electronic commerce. So, what is electronic commerce? These are business transactions which, well, they happen over the internet. It's built on top of internet protocols such as TCP/IP. Now, remember from our when we talked about networks, TCP/IP is the connection which verifies that the traffic, when you send it, comes back as well, and so it's a verified connection. Whereas UDP is just blasting the information out there, and they're trying to grab whatever is available. And so e-commerce has to be built on top of TCP/IP because of that guarantee that the information actually gets there. And electronic payments underlie all of the e-commerce. So initially, e-commerce was really order something and then pay for it, but they started to add in electronic payments of some sort so that they could actually get the money at that time. So there's two different types. There's business to business and business to consumer. And we'll talk about both of those. This video right here, which we aren't going to watch in the recording, but you can watch it on your own, is a guy's, it's a TED Talk, which if you've never seen TED Talks, they're actually quite interesting, and there's a lot of really great TED Talks out there. But it's this guy talking about the history of e-commerce and what he sees as a future. And so when you watch it, one of the things that he will come up with as part of the future is known as augmented reality. And it's this idea that you have your camera or your phone, and if you wanted to buy furniture for a room, for example, you take your phone and you uh, open up the application and then you point it in your room, and you can drag furniture on the phone screen to different locations, and it looks like it's actually in the room. So it's this augmented reality idea. That and virtual reality, I believe, will be big things to come in the future of e-commerce. Maybe not necessarily augmented reality, but maybe people will take a picture of a room and then it will upload to a website, and then they can digitally put furniture in there so they can see what it will look like. So, business to business commerce. So this is a focus on a business supplying other businesses. They aren't supplying to consumers, and this was really the very beginnings of e-commerce. In the past, you had catalogs that consumers would order from, but then you had separate catalogs that just businesses would order from. And those were the first to actually get onto the internet and e-commerce for actual large scale distribution. And the orders, which typically come from this B2B commerce, are going to be higher volume. So if you go onto Amazon or you go onto your favorite web store and you try to buy something, typically you'll buy one or a couple of something. Whereas business to business, they deal in volumes. And so they will order 500 of the same thing or 1,000 of the same thing. And part of that means that they get discounts. So the more that they order, the cheaper each individual unit is. So the business supply chain is a good example. Any manufacturing business needs some sort of raw material. As a product proceeds down the assembly line, it consumes those raw materials, and as material inventory dwindles, there may be an automated system which goes out and orders resupply from whichever vendor they have a relationship with to keep that supply line constantly working. E-commerce can enable just-in-time inventory practices. Inventory costs money, requires space. The closer you get inventory compared to when you need it, the cheaper it is. So e-commerce allows you to have a smaller warehouse to store this content and still be able to fulfill whatever business needs somebody may have. And then shelf life is concerned in the food industry. So food doesn't stay forever, except for salt and honey and a couple of things, but most food doesn't actually last forever. So business purchasing tends to be in larger volumes, and there's more emphasis on shipping and delivery. So the initial deliveries they usually wait until there's a large enough order and then they ship it out. And so with the larger volumes, you typically will get a larger order and they will try to bundle everything up and ship it at the same time. Sometimes these shipments can take a lot longer than consumers may want. So if a business is ordering something from overseas, like from a Chinese factory, for example, that order could take a month to 2 months to actually get here. It gets loaded onto a boat, it has to travel across the Pacific Ocean, then it gets unloaded from the boat, then it has to go through customs, and it has to do all this other stuff. But that entire process, that's usually all automated. And as a consumer, you don't see that process, but the business has to take that into account when they order stuff. Um, a business to business web presence is more about processes and less about marketing. So the purchasing business knows exactly what it needs. It's not going to go to a website and go looking around for different items and different things. They know exactly what the specs of whatever item they want to buy, and they will go there and get that exact item. They aren't going to try to compare and contrast between different parts. And some of these orders can be quite complex because even though, so as a consumer, you go out there and you buy, say, the latest iPhone, and you might have, well, let's see, the latest iPhone, there's 4 different versions, and each one of those versions you just have spaces or space decisions. But I mean, you have maybe 16 possible combinations, somewhere around there. But a business, when they're ordering something, there may be hundreds or thousands of different options and different specs and everything that they have to go through. And they have to know exactly which parts they need for each process and each component. And so their orders are going to have to be incredibly detailed. A lot of times, businesses need to have an agreement between the vendor. And so you can't just choose a new vendor and start ordering stuff from there. There usually has to be a contract. There has to be agreement saying that they will buy X amount of stuff every year in exchange for a certain discount. And so that's very standard to have business agreements to where they have to buy a certain amount of stuff every year from this vendor, or the contract is null and void and they lose whatever discounts they had. And transactions often involve standardized messages, such as EDI, which I believe is, let's see, yeah, electronic data interchange. And that's how businesses will communicate with each other. So the government is a real large part of the business to business e-commerce. So the government, especially the military, orders a lot of stuff from other businesses. And a lot of contractors will order a lot of stuff from other businesses, specifically for government contracts. And so those orders can get quite large. They can get very, very specialized. One of my friends, he actually used to work or used to be in the Air Force, and he was stationed somewhere in the Middle East. And I'm not sure exactly where it was, but he was on one of the bases there, and he did satellite communications. And one of their devices broke. And in the US, trying to get something, yeah, it might take a couple of days, it might take a week or so, but you can get most any parts you want. When you're in the middle of a foreign country, especially a hostile foreign country at the time, trying to get parts is quite expensive and quite difficult. And so the military, what they will typically do is they will order, they will have a order list of whatever they expect to need for the next month, and they will order that all at once. And they'll get constant shipments in, but if you need something new or something breaks, you have to go to a supply officer and you then have to uh, fill out some sort of requisition form, and it may take quite a long length of time, and then it comes on a regular shipment. Well, my friend, because he was working in satellite communications, their equipment is considered, I guess, mission critical. And so a part broke. And so he went to I guess the supply officer or the requisition officer and wanted to get this. And he said, this needs to be here tomorrow. And the guy there just basically laughed at him and said, no, there's no way it's getting here. And he's like, no, just put it in there and it will get here. And the Guy didn't believe him, but he put in the order. And sure enough, the next day, I guess it was like an F-16 or some fighter jet landed. They got out of the plane, or they actually opened up the cargo section of the plane, which those don't have a lot of storage place, pulled out the one box, gave it to my friend, and I guess the supply officer was quite shocked that they would fly a several $1 million airplane to haul in one small piece of equipment, and that was it. After it was unloaded, then the plane took off and left and did something else. So most of these orders are going to be all bundled together. That was kind of an exception, but it kind of gives the idea of how this business to business exchange can happen and how there are ways that businesses can get equipment in very short lengths of times. And the defense acquisition, so the Department of Defense has rules. These rules can be very, very long, and they're designed to protect against fraud, abuse, or favoritism, which, I mean, if you know anything about the government, they're designed to protect against that. That doesn't necessarily mean they do entirely protect against it. But whenever somebody finds a loophole to one of those rules, eventually a new rule will come into place, which closes that loophole. It may open up another one, but it closes that one. Let's see. So the electronic data interchange, that's how businesses can communicate with each other. And typically this is going to be larger businesses or healthcare or government, stuff like that. And there are a set of standards that you can actually read about if you are so inclined. And it's widely used in other industries, healthcare. It's a basis of electrical or electronic medical records. So I wanted to show an example really quick of a business-to-business commerce site. And so let me go ahead and open this up. And so Alibaba.com. So if you've never heard of Alibaba, apparently this website is not secure. Let's go ahead and just proceed anyway. Oh, that's always forget an A. Okay, I thought I typed that correct the first time, but maybe I missed something. So this one is actually secure. But this is Alibaba. This is the Chinese, it's not really Chinese Amazon, but this is interfacing with Chinese factories and manufacturing. So you can type something in here. Let's just go ahead and choose something. This. Okay, that didn't actually open it up. There we go. So this is a hot sale nail polish color display acrylic stand. I mean, I'm not going to buy one, but if you wanted to buy one, this website deals specifically with shipping to businesses or shipping large orders. So you can buy these for $11 a piece, provided you buy at least 100. Notice the more you buy, if you buy more than 3,000, then they're only $8.50 a piece. The shipping time on this, it would go via sea freight or land freight or air freight. Sea freight is going to be cheapest, but it will typically take a month or so to get to you. So 1 to 100, you have an estimated lead time of 25 days. The more you order, I mean, you might have to negotiate it, but you can order it and you can add a logo. You can do all sorts of stuff. So this is just a display rack. If you were an inventor or you had a business that you were designing a product, you could come up with the design of a product. You could find a company here. Notice this is SunSky Technologies Company Limited. If you had a good relationship with them, you could contact them. Maybe it's similar to this or some other product that they may be able to manufacture. And you could enter into an agreement saying, hey, I want to get 10,000 of whatever you design. And they would come up with a price, they would manufacture it. And this is typically the factory itself that you're dealing with or a company which directly deals with the factory. So you can actually see company profiles. This is a private owner. They're in China. And so you can see all sorts of information about it. But Alibaba is dealing with the factories or largely cutting out the middleman. And actually getting large amounts of a product delivered to you. So this would be a business to business site. And so unlike Amazon, you have to buy a minimum order. The next one is business to consumer commerce. So this is more of what you're familiar with. So in order to buy stuff, there needs to be marketing, there needs to be web design, you need to have an electronic cart, you need to have all sorts of stuff. So Amazon really did popularize this idea of online market spaces. And if you watch that video, then Amazon actually started selling books originally, and then they grew to the powerhouse that they are these days. Um, and so an equivalent, oops, let's see, go here. An equivalent is AliExpress. So AliExpress is the consumer side of Alibaba. And this one is also the Chinese Amazon. And so whereas in Alibaba, you would buy, say, 100 of these. Let's see if I can actually find this on AliExpress. Go here, and nope, nail polish color. Let's just do a nail polish color display. Yeah, so I'm not seeing that exact one, but you can buy individual things. Apparently that is only a cent, which is kind of surprising. You can buy these if you wanted to, which is gel nail polish, plastic bottle, matte effect, no wipe. I guess this is individual nail polish in that color for 58 cents. And so these, you can order it. The shipping time usually takes about the same length of time. Usually it's a couple of weeks to a month or two. But instead of dealing with the factories directly, you are dealing with a middleman of sorts. Does it actually have a company name here? I've never actually looked up nail polish. I don't wear nail polish, so that's why I would never look this up. But some of them, it will list the company that you're buying it from, and I don't actually see it here. V6 Nail Art Store. And so they are their own company, and a lot of times they will interact with the factories and then buy it from the factory and then sell it to you. And so these are the middleman. Another type of middleman that you can have is known as drop shipping, to where you set up your own business store and you set up a web page similar to this, but then when somebody orders it from you, you turn around and you immediately order it from, say, V6 Nail Art Store, and you tell them to deliver it to the customer. So you don't actually have to maintain any of the products in your location. All you do is just, you're the middleman to the middleman. So those are several different types of business to consumer. And so there needs to be a way to pay for that stuff. These are typically going to be credit card transaction processing. Or it could be an electronic wallet, it could be gift cards, it could be something along those lines. These days, free shipping is all the rage. Sometimes you may have to pay for shipping, but a lot of times you want to get it for free. So if you have Amazon Prime, typically you get free shipping. Sorry, that's my dog who decided to bark all of a sudden. So if you have Amazon Prime, then you'll get shipping for free. If not, then you might have a minimum order cost. And so the question is, how do they actually get free shipping for all of that? Well, volumes. And so Amazon, they've been building warehouses all over the US, and they're stocking it with the most commonly purchased items. And that way, when you order something, if it's in a warehouse close to you, then they'll just package it up, put it on a truck, and just ship it off to you, and it will be to your house within a couple of days usually. Other places, they'll actually do same day delivery. So if you live in one of the big cities like Seattle, which is where Amazon is based out of, San Francisco, places like that, they have a lot of the stuff in the warehouses right there. And a lot of the stuff that you can order on Amazon will get delivered the exact same day. And so they'll have armies of delivery vans. They're actually constantly hiring people. You may have seen some of the news about some of the conditions that warehouse workers have worked in. So that's Amazon. They've been having issues with that, but the free shipping is one of their big draws. And that's one of the things that a lot of businesses are starting to do so that people don't have to pay shipping costs. It used to be in the past that shipping costs were a large cost to doing business and large cost for actually buying stuff online, and people didn't want to pay that. And so what they would do is they would go to a local store, and sure, they might have to pay taxes, but they didn't have to pay the extra shipping costs, especially if the local store would price match whatever was on Amazon. Well, Amazon started offering free shipping to try to draw people from the brick and mortar stores and start buying it online. Um, and so they also use automated route finding algorithms to try to determine the most efficient way to deliver packages in a city. There's a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning which goes into this, and it's quite a lot of interesting information, interesting computer science which goes into building these processes. Um, so there's online services also, music, so downloads, streaming services. And so one of the questions is, what has this done to the artist's income? So thinking back to before there was online services, um, artists would go to a recording company, Sony, BMG, or I can't remember all the different company names, but there were several different companies out there which they would sign the artist to a contract, and that artist would have to produce a certain number of albums a year, and then they would have to do a certain number of things, and the recording company would then have the rights to distribute that music and give the artist a certain percentage of each CD sale, for example. The problem is, well, recording companies didn't pay that much for the CD sales. Most artists would get, say, 50 cents per CD or a very, very small amount. They would generally make most of their money from concerts and touring. And that's where they would, because the recording companies didn't have controls over the concerts, so they would make a larger percentage from the ticket sales. Streaming, though, has kind of flipped that. Artists are now starting to discover, well, they've been discovering that if you can stream online and use a company like Spotify or Pandora or something, then you can typically make a higher percentage. I don't remember how much Spotify will pay per play, but because a lot more people may listen to their music and don't have to buy an entire CD that you may only want to listen to one or two songs, artists are now getting a higher percentage of income because more people are wanting to and able to listen to their music. And so artist incomes have actually increased, and more than just big name artists. It's actually the indie music, the people which maybe it's just a couple of people who got together and decided to start a band. They'll record something, put it up on Spotify or Pandora, and people start listening to it, and they make a lot more money than they normally would if they signed a contract. So online services have definitely helped the independent artists or the indie artists. Same with video streaming or video services. So there is online streaming. And one of the questions I always like to ask is, what's the pros and cons to watching a streaming video? Well, one of the common pros is no commercials or limited commercials. I remember back in the day having to watch something on cable TV, and every what was it, probably like 5 to 10 minutes, there would be 3 minutes worth of commercials. And you could actually, if you watch some video or some old shows, you can actually tell when they normally would cut to commercial because it would kind of wrap up that segment, and then you knew that it was going to go to commercial or commercial break. And with online streaming, you don't have to have as many commercials. If you pay for Netflix or Disney Plus or HBO Now or one of those services, their shows don't have commercials. Hulu, I believe, has a couple of different tiers, and one of those does have commercials, but those commercials are typically about 30 seconds long, if I remember correctly. And so they aren't nearly as bad as having to sit through 3 minutes worth of commercials. So it changes the way that you watch it. You also can watch an entire season worth of a show, or you can binge an entire series. I remember watching I think it's 10 episodes in the first season of Stranger Things. I remember watching all of that in one night because, well, it was interesting. With regular broadcast TV, you would watch an episode every week, and you might have to wait until the new episode was aired. On the other hand, it has increased piracy a huge amount. And so piracy is obtaining copyrighted material without expressed permission. And this can be something like streaming it through an illegal streaming service. So if it's a Netflix show, not watching it through Netflix, watching it through some other website. Or it could be actually downloading a show, which then you download and you obtain or acquire the actual video files and then you watch it. So piracy has been a thing which has happened since, well, the dawn of time. It's happened way before computers ever came about. You would have pirates actually roaming the seas and trying to rob merchant vessels. And in modern times, pirates or piracy is more of actually downloading content illegally or against copyright laws. And it's been a big problem that companies have tried to fight against. And a lot of the recording industry and the movie industry, they've ended up filing lawsuits against people for downloading or streaming video and music. And so it's one of those where it exists, but really, if you're going to watch something, it's best to support the artists because they're usually the ones that suffer. If nobody is downloading or if nobody is purchasing their albums, then the artist may go out of business. And it's usually going to be the indie artists or the small game companies or the small TV series companies or the small video producers which may go out of business and will suffer largely. So other online services, books. Amazon led the way for consumer purchases, first as physical books and then as electronic books. Um, and the electronic books, they have it through their Kindle, or they also have Audible, where you can listen to audiobooks, which some of those are actually quite cool. And I've heard some of the audiobooks like Ready Player One, which Will Wheaton from Star Trek Next Generation actually read the entire book. Other books may be read by famous celebrities or maybe the author or somebody else. So books, it used to be you had to go to a brick and mortar store like Barnes and Noble or Borders, or there were a couple of others out there, but largely those stores started to go away, uh, uh, mainly after Amazon started to sell books online. So these are the different types of business to consumer commerce. There's lots and lots of other ones out there. The last thing I want to talk about is electronic payments. So in order to buy stuff, you have to pay for it somehow. I mean, it'd be a great world if you could just get everything for free, but sadly, it doesn't work that way. So there has to be a way to pay for stuff online. And so typically you will add something to a shopping cart, and then you will go through a payment process, which involves entering credit card details. And so there are links here that you can follow every so often, the New York Times, and everything else. But in order to buy stuff, a business has to be what's known as PCI compliant. I think I mentioned it. I do not. I talk about PCI compliance more on the next one. But there's an agreement as to how you can store credit card information, how you can use that credit card information, and it's known as PCI compliant. Um, Other businesses, if you're not taking payments or credit card payments, you might have an agreement with some digital wallet company or something like PayPal or Amazon. Maybe if you're just directing the payments through Amazon or a third-party vendor, you'd have to have a separate agreement there. There's also internet payment systems like PayPal. You can have a PayPal wallet. The, so, does anybody know who created PayPal or was one of the creators of PayPal? Well, it was Elon Musk. He actually started PayPal and then he sold it and went on to create Tesla. There's also electronic wallets, Android Pay, Apple Pay, Google Wallet, Samsung Pay. I think Google now actually has Google Pay, which is uh, a digital wallet to where you can add a bunch of cards in there. So I probably need to update this slide. There's also electronic currencies or cryptocurrencies. And we'll talk a little bit more, and I'll actually stop this video before talking about Bitcoin because I'm trying to keep these videos shorter. But Bitcoin is one of the more popular cryptocurrencies. So talking about credit card processing, there are four parties involved: the merchant, the customer, the merchant's bank, and the customer's bank. Transactions need a credit card number, an address, and what's known as a CVV or card verification value. And that's a three-digit number which is on the card that verifies that even if somebody gets the credit card number, they can't make any purchases without that extra 3 or 4 digit number. And so when you do this, you actually enter the information into the merchant's page, the customer does. The merchant then goes to their bank. Well, actually, it goes to the credit card processing, which then goes to the customer bank and says, hey, there's a transaction for this amount for this customer. Is there enough money or is there sufficient funds? And then the bank responds back with a yes or a no. And if it responds back with a yes, then the merchant goes to their bank and says, okay, there's going to be these funds and this is the transaction. And then they sell the item to the actual customer. And then typically what will happen is there will be a hold place on the funds. And then the item goes out and it takes a day or two for those funds to actually clear. And then the merchant gets paid. But the customer, this all happens transparently in the background. And occasionally problems arise. So you buy something, you get it, it ends up being not what you had ordered. The way that you should approach it is you should go to the merchant and you should try to work it out. You should basically say, hey, this isn't what I ordered. This was broken, something like that. And then open up a dialogue with the merchant, and the merchant will generally work with you. They'll have you ship it back, and then they'll send out a new one, or they may send you out a new one and then want the replacement one back. However, it works, and that usually works. But sometimes merchants just don't do that, and so in order to protect the customer, you can initiate what's known as a chargeback. And this is the customer going to their credit card company and saying, hey, I've tried to deal with this merchant. This merchant is basically ignoring me and we're getting nowhere. And then you detail what happened and why you did not get what you expected. And a chargeback will be filed, which means that your credit card company gives you the funds. And then they go to the merchant and say, hey, you owe us this amount of money. And they actually handle recovering all those funds. Now, chargebacks are really, really bad for a merchant because it's a mark on the record that the credit card company no longer trusts them anymore. And so if a merchant gets too many chargebacks, then they could lose their ability to accept credit cards, which is really bad. But if a customer fraudulently files a chargeback, then that's really, really bad for a customer because they could literally lose the ability to have any credit cards because all these companies kind of talk together and they have agreements with each other. So chargebacks are great if you cannot get any resolution with the merchant, but by far the best way is to go to the merchant, talk to them first, and try to work out whatever dispute you have. And so part of that is also this PCI compliance, which stands for payment card holders, let's see, PCI, payment card industry. And this is the industry which actually processes credit card payments. And so what they did is they actually kind of got together. So it's Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, and a couple of other businesses. They got together and said, hey, there needs to be a standard for how credit card transactions are processed. What's required of a business? And so they created this set of standards that every business that takes credit cards has to follow. And this is known as PCI compliance. And so a business, in order to take credit cards, has to be PCI compliant, and they have to report every year to the vendors how compliant they are. How are they actually upholding the type of compliance? So this is different than, say, HIPAA compliance. So HIPAA is um, basically healthcare information. So it's how you have to secure patient information. That is a law put into place by the government. If somebody violates HIPAA, they get sent to jail. Or, well, they could get sent to jail. They could get fined. They will lose their job, so on and so forth. PCI compliance is an agreement between the card industry and businesses. If somebody violates PCI, then they could lose the ability to accept credit cards, which, if you're a business, that is really incredibly bad because if you lose the ability to take credit cards, well, you lose the ability to do any sort of online transactions. And so PCI compliance is one of these which businesses have to conform to, but it's not a law. It's just an industry saying that, hey, if you want to take credit cards, you have to conform to what we say. So this is e-commerce in a short nutshell. Hopefully it's pretty short. Haven't been watching the time, but e-commerce, everybody has probably bought something online, so it's nothing which is too surprising, but it does give you an idea of a lot more of the stuff which works in the background to actually um, fulfill orders when you make it or actually go through an entire purchase. So hopefully you enjoyed this short little jaunt into the e-commerce. Definitely check out the links which are in this PowerPoint and watch the video, which was linked on, I think it was slide 2. It is really interesting. It's not that long. I think it's 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes, somewhere around there. But it is a interesting video for what this individual believes the future of e-commerce will be. Thank you very much.